I don't know what I might get more emotional over. This being our last show of the season, or the fact the SEC may only get 2 teams into the 12-team playoff, while the ACC may backdoor their way in with 3 teams. We're not here to discuss all those projections, though. We are here to educate you on Week 14. And who am I kidding? It's the show. Let's be real. Happy Thanksgiving to all of our Phil Steele Show consumers. Another record-setting Week 13 with viewership on the YouTube Varsity channel. Happy Turkey Week to Phil, Tripp Hurd, both of whom are with me today. I'm Colin Schassberger. Thankful to have them. Thankful for all those who have allowed us to entertain and educate them each and every week. Phil, I know you feel the same.
Oh, absolutely. And, Thanksgiving weekend, it's the most games of any week of the year as far as FBS versus FBS games. So a lot to be thankful for. And you get a full Friday of games and then a full Saturday game. It's like having 2 weekends back to back.
And Tripp and I are having to navigate on these basketball and football schedules, the ops side, because we do have regular day jobs. And Tripp runs the board for Butler basketball, which is going to take you away from your family on Thanksgiving. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. We'll miss Thanksgiving dinner. Probably going to miss Black Friday dinner too, but that's okay. It's okay. It's right. That time of year.
It is that time of the year, and you're going to take us to New Orleans, Crescent City for the first game. Just one game, no Egg Bowl on Thursday, and it's Memphis and Tulane.
Yeah, let's do it. 7:30 kick tomorrow for Memphis and Tulane, Ullman Stadium. Wave favored by 14 and a half points here. Already secured a spot in the AAC title game. They're 9-2 overall, but maybe a little bit of a tricky spot here. Tulane's keeping their eye on what Boise is doing right now. Should still have a motivated team, but this is a pretty big number, 14 and a half. Maybe Memphis can provide them with a close game here. Seth Hennigan's been putting big numbers up again at quarterback, but it just seems like Tulane's had the Tigers' number here recently. Phil, what side do you like in this one?
Yeah, I'm going to lean with Tulane. Excuse me, I'm going to lean with Tulane in this one. Now, the situation, as you mentioned, not great. They're coming off playing an option team last week. They have an option team next week. You got to think they're worried about Army. Win that game against Army and big things, but they can't afford to slip up here if they're going to make the playoff. And this has just been a Tulane team that's been absolutely dominant. Probably, you go back to the North Texas game. They only won by 8, but they gave up a couple of late scores in that. The Rice game is really the only game they haven't blown out their opponent recently. Playing great football. They run the football well, play great defense. Memphis usually struggles on the road and have struggled a little bit on the road again this year. They lost at Navy, lost at UTSA. They do have a potent offense, but even though Tulane's got that big game on deck against the option, I still like Tulane minus the points. They've just been a money machine for me.
I'll tell you what I'm here for, and I was texting the voice of the Green Wave, Corey Galore, over the weekend when I was taking all of those upsets late on Saturday night and had all these bracket projections that were racking my mind when I was 10 or 15 beers deep after enjoying a Friendsgiving ahead of Thanksgiving, since I'm also going to miss Thursday. I'll be in Daytona with Arkansas women's basketball. Give me Tulane in the playoff as an at-large G5 team, or possibly jumping Boise State should they lose as a group of 5 conference champion that's ranked the highest of the group of 5 ranks. I think, Phil, there is a scenario, and I know you're not here for this, but just to remind those who maybe aren't consuming or, trying to make sense of all these scenarios, if we have a 3-loss Big 12 champion, which is very much a possibility, does the Big 12 get left out altogether and open the door for a Tulane even to get in? I doubt that one, but still, I would like some chaos where Tulane joins possibly Boise State in the field, because I'm with you. I think they're playing, and they may give a bigger test than what Boise State could in a P5 playoff showdown the way they've been playing football. Let's jump.
A couple notes on that, Kyle. First of all, I don't talk about the playoffs until this week. Now they're relevant. So like when we get to South Carolina, Clemson, we can talk playoff, because we're not talking about the future. We're talking about after this game for a lot of teams, because they don't have the conference championship. So we can talk playoff now. And then the second thing would be Tulane, I thought, outplayed Kansas State earlier this year, played a really good game against Oklahoma. I do think that there is a possibility they get in over a Big 12 team.
Yeah, I love it. I was subscribing my entire mental capacity to playoff scenarios, knowing that we just had one regular season week remaining. And now it's fun. Now the conversation actually means something. There's substance there versus having a crystal ball in front of us and trying to forecast 2, 3, 4 weeks ahead of time. So let's jump to Friday. 11th ranked Boise State could be a trap game. They're at home taking on Oregon State. Boise has been flirting with disaster. It's a 12 o'clock game on Fox. Broncos favored by 19, 56.5 is the total. Beavers have won 6 of 10 and 2 of the last 3 straight up with the Broncos. And in spite of a string of 5 losses, their 41-38 win over Wazoo for the Pac-2, the Tupac title, has them 1 win away from bowl eligibility, Phil.
Yeah, you think they'll hang banners for the Pac-12 title?
I
would. I mean, they're in the Pac-12 and they won the title. I think Oregon State's playing good football. I like the upset of Washington State last week. I favored Oregon State in that one. They've been playing good football most of the year. In fact, you go back to Nevada, UNLV games. Those are games that they had leads in the second half and ended up losing them late and ended up losing the game. So they're a pretty dangerous team. With Boise, I don't think they need style points. They just need to win. They've got that playoff berth, I think, in their grasp. If they beat Oregon State, win the Mountain West title game next week, they're in. And we've seen them playing a little tight the last couple of weeks, only beating Nevada by 7. Fortunate cover against San Jose State. Thank you for that one, Boise. And then only getting past Wyoming by 4 late last week. So I like Oregon State plus the points. I do think Boise wins. I do think Boise's deserving of a playoff spot. But this time of year, with all that pressure and the big Mountain West title game on deck, I'm going to lean with the points here as with the dog.
Both Oklahoma State and Colorado were letdowns for me last week. The Cowboys lost a shootout with Texas Tech. The Buffs gave up about 1,500 yards on the ground in that loss to Kansas. The two are going to meet in Boulder this week with Colorado as a 17-point favorite. Buffs cover streak is over. The Pokes haven't covered since mid-October, but they did get Ollie Gordon going a little bit last week. He had over 150 on the ground, 3 touchdowns. Coach Prime, 7-1-1 against the spread off a loss at Colorado. However, they're only 3-6 straight up in those games. Over something to look at here in this game, 64.5 is what I'm seeing right now. This could be one of those defense optional games. What do you like here, Phil?
That's a pretty good call, Tripp. I would say the over is the way to go anytime Oklahoma State's on the field because they don't have a defense. I mean, their defense is giving opponents 114 yards per game above their season average. That's number 131 in the country. Offensively, as you mentioned, Ollie Gordon getting it going a little bit. I like their new quarterback, Smith. He's looked good at for the most part. And they, it was a backs to the wall game last week against Texas Tech, and they gave them a good game. They're back and forth trading scores until the interception returned for a touchdown, turned it in favor and made it a 2-score game. They ended up losing by 8. With Colorado, it is their final home game, so tough to go against them there. But I like your over. You got to think that Shedeur Sanders' final home game, Travis Hunter's final home game, they try to get those guys some points. And Oklahoma State's defense is very, very giving in that respect.
Yeah, because of that defense, I expect that to be a heavy cut-up game or scout tape game to project the draft potential for Shedeur Sanders and Travis Hunter, and you'll see it replayed. A lot of images from this game against Oklahoma State because I think there'll be a lot of Colorado highlights. There's already been plenty to this point, but I think that'll be a game that certainly ESPN and others, lean onto when they showcase the upcoming NFL draft. Phil, I want a MAC title game projection with 2 games with some heavy MAC implications. Win and you're in between Miami and Bowling Green. BG favored by 3, 42 is the total, 12 o'clock on ESPNU. I think you feel more strongly about the other game, though, with Ohio, where if they win, they're also in. 15.5 is what, or 15 is what they're laying against Ball State. 52.5 is the total, 12 o'clock ESPN. Redhawks, Falcons, Bobcats all control their own destinies in making the league title game. If Ohio does lose, Phil, just to map it out, no matter who wins, Miami and Bowling Green will rematch. They'll play the following week for the MAC title game. Quite the letdown, though, if the Bobcats lose to a team that just fired their coach a couple of weeks ago in Ball State.
Yeah, great research there. I appreciate that. And in this game, first of all, the Miami Bowling Green game, I find a tough one to pick because we saw BG go into Penn State and outplay Penn State in the first half and come up just short. They went into Texas A&M, and we saw them almost upset Texas A&M. Just came up short. They're a team that, when they're playing their A game and not playing down to the level of their competition, is one of the top in the MAC. And then Miami of Ohio and Chuck Martin, they just are, they always mail in the non-conference games. In this case, they lost the opener in the MAC, but have been dominant since. So tough to go against either of those two teams. Should be a great game, but I clearly like Ohio. Mike New, the head coach, the former head coach of Ball State, was an excellent away dog. And they've had a lot of close games this year. They only lost to Western by 3. They lost to Vandy by 10. They took Miami of Ohio to the wire. They took Buffalo to the wire. They've been playing really good. Then they fired Mike New. And last week, generally you get a coaching bounce. You lose your coach and you get that bounce. They didn't even get the bounce last week. They lost 38-13. That tells me that Ball State's mailed in the rest of the season. Coaches are trying to find jobs. Players are probably trying to find the portal. And meanwhile, Ohio's just been crushing opponents. They crushed Buffalo 47-16, crushed Kent State 41-0, Eastern Michigan by 25, and even Toledo, a really good Toledo team, they beat by 17 on the road and had a 17-9 first down edge, 367 to 212 yard edge. This is an Ohio team on a row against a Ball State team that's mailed it in. Ohio's at home, final home game, playing for something. I like the Bobcats minus the points here.
All right, 3:30 kick for the Egg Bowl on Friday. Ole Miss laying 26 at home after that disappointing loss last week in the Swamp. Maybe that took them out of the playoff contention. I guess we'll see over here in the next couple of weeks. This is the first time the spread in this game has been north of 20 points since 1962. I tried to look up a couple inventions. I think maybe like the cordless phone, the pager. Kyle can double check me on that. The total in this one, 61. Maybe you wouldn't think it, but this has been a great under game in this series. It's gone under in 9 of the last 10 meetings. What's the best angle on this one, Phil?
Yeah, I think I'm going to have to lean with the over in this one for this year. And the fact that when you look at Mississippi State, they are a pure over team. They have a really bad defense. They give up 78 yards above what opponents come in averaging. They're poor on the rush D, allowing 5 yards per carry. They're poor on the pass D, allowing nearly 72%. Ole Miss is going to score some points. But the thing we learned about Mississippi State is if they get down, they're going to keep punching. You go back to the Georgia game; they ended up putting up 31 points against Georgia, but that was a lot of it was late with Georgia in control of the game. They put up 24 against a really good A&M defense, 28 against Florida, and once again they were down against Florida big. So with Michael Van Buren at QB, I think they can put some points on the board. I would lean with the over. I know 2 years ago it sure looked like it would be an over game. Turned out to be under because there's so many blown scoring opportunities. But I think this year they convert them into points and do get the scores. And so I'm going to lean with the over in this one.
Yeah, Tripp, 1962, you're right. The cordless phone, the pager, the discovery of the molecular structure of DNA. I mean, there's some deep-seated stuff. We do know World War II ended before that, though. We do know that much, before 1962.
Liberty. We got some comments on that, didn't we?
Yes, I love it. I love it. It's a common misconception. I think 90% of the world misses out when it technically came to a close. But we're not going to relitigate that. That happened decades ago, okay? Liberty is laying 2.5 at Sam Houston, 3:30 CBS Sports Network. Here's your CUSA update here heading into the final week of the season. Jacksonville State has already secured hosting Conference USA title game, no matter what happens against Western Kentucky. But will it be against Liberty, Sam Houston, or the Hilltoppers? Flames can clinch with a win over the Bearcats. WKU clinches with a win over Jack State and a Liberty loss. And Sam Houston needs a win over Liberty and a Jack State win over WKU. One thing is for certain here, Phil, that I feel. I'm not counting Liberty and Jamie Chadwell out in this spot. When the lights are brightest, or a team that has been here. I know they got destroyed on the New Year's Six stage a year ago, but Liberty laying 2.5 as a road favorite. Tricky spot. What do you think about this one at 3:30 on Friday?
Yeah, I like Liberty here, and the spread's cheap at 2.5. Now, granted, Sam Houston State's been great all year. They only have 3 losses. Come into this game 8-3. Last week they lost to Jacksonville State, though, by 10. And their offense has really gone by the wayside. You look at them the last 4 weeks, they're only averaging 13 points per game, 279 yards per game. And the key with Liberty, if they're a big favorite, forget it. Bet against them. They don't cover. Go back to even the UTEP game. They took a knee at the end of the game at the 1 yard line and didn't cover that game. They've had a lot of games like that. They were sort of unimpressive against East Carolina, got outplayed, got beat by Kennesaw State. But make them not a big favorite, and it's a completely different story. Case in point, last week against Western Kentucky, beat them 38-21 handily at home. Now, granted, they're on the road, but I think you're going to see Caden Salter running the football much like he did last year, and he's starting to run the football more. Salter last year ran for 1,000 yards. A couple of weeks ago, he only had about 250 yards rushing. Now he's up to 564. So they were probably trying to keep him healthy to secure that CUSA title game. You're going to see Caden Salter running the football here. along with Quentin Quilley. They've got the defensive edge and the offensive edge. I like Liberty minus the points here. Somebody on mute?
Oh, yeah, that I got Tripp out because he's fixing his mic. So I'm here, Phil. I apologize. Utah State is visiting Colorado State. The Rams are laying 6, 59.5 is the total, 330 on FS1. Tripp has the intel on this one, but I'll let you frame it up for us on Friday. Utah State and Colorado State. Got a certain lean here, Phil.
Yeah, I'm going to lean with Utah State plus the points. I know their defense hasn't been good all year, giving up a lot of yards, a lot of points. Playing better football, though, the last 2 weeks. Allowed just 412 yards to San Diego State, 309 to Hawaii. I like the way their offense has come on. And Spencer Petras had been the catalyst of that offense, but Bryson Barnes took over for an injured Petras and moved him quite well against San Diego State last week in a 41-20 win. They blew out Hawaii the week before that, so they're playing the best football right now. Colorado State was a great story. 6 straight covers. They were on a roll, but they ended up losing to Fresno State last week on the road. So I think when you look at this matchup, you got 2 really good teams. I would have put Colorado State about a 3-point favorite here. They're the 6-point favorite, so I'll take the dog in Utah State.
Georgia Tech is visiting Georgia Friday night, 7:30, ABC. Dogs are laying 19.5. 54 is the total. It's the first non-Saturday game at Sanford Stadium, Phil, since the Bulldogs and Yellow Jackets headlined Black Friday 30 years ago. Gave you the origins of the world's largest cocktail party a month ago. Clean old-fashioned hate originates when author Bill Cromartie birthed the moniker in a 1970s book. Dogs have won 6 straight, losing only 4 times since 2000. It's got no bearing on next week. They're going to play in Atlanta. They're playing for an SEC title game. But should they lose Friday, Phil, that makes Atlanta against either Texas or Texas A&M, I believe, a must-win for the playoff.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is one where I think when you take a look at the series, the visitors done quite well. Also, when you look at Georgia this year, they're not a great double-digit favorite. I don't even know if they covered as a double-digit favorite this year. They cover when the game is on the line, and the game is on the line next week when they want to get the SEC title game. So I think there's going to be a little bit of a look ahead there. I think you have a poor home favorite here in Georgia, and the series reflects that. Then you also have a great away dog. I mean, Brent Key, I believe he's 8-2 straight up against ranked teams. Not straight up, 8-2 against the spread against ranked teams, but I believe 7 of those were outright. Does a tremendous job getting his team up. This is a rivalry game. And Haynes King finally getting healthy. They've got Aaron Philo, who's been looking good, also playing at the quarterback position. They've got Haynes at running back. I think it's going to be your usual Georgia big favorite game, and Georgia Tech, great underdog. I'm going to take Georgia Tech plus the points here.
Also on Friday night, 7:30, Iowa is hosting Nebraska. Hawkeyes laying 6, 39.5 is the total. This is a 7:30 game on NBC. Nebraska was the only winner I had last week, Phil, and we'll have your power plays coming up at the end of the show. You had a winning weekend. I went 1-2, but Nebraska covering at home against Wisconsin, that was easy money. So can they cover, though, as a 6-point dog at Iowa? Interesting Big Ten showdown, low total, 39.5.
Yeah, Nebraska, I mean, last week was huge. They needed to get to a bowl, and it's been a long time. And they had 8 straight games where they had a chance to get to a bowl game and lost, and they finally got that monkey off their back. It's got to be a great sense of relief. Now, I do like what I saw to Dylan Raiola last week. If you go back to the start of the year, Raiola looked pretty good those first couple of games, then sort of looked like a freshman after that. But Raiola started to look like Dylan Raiola again. Threw for almost 300 yards last week, hit 28 of 38, highly efficient. But this is an Iowa team that's really good. They're at home. I think they catch Nebraska in a letdown situation coming off that massive, massive win. I mean, they had to win that game last week. Iowa is a team that in the month of November is 20-2. It is a rivalry game, but I like Caleb Johnson, a running back. I think he's going to be able to get some running room here against the Nebraska defense that hasn't been quite as formidable as I thought it would be. So I'm going to side with Iowa minus the points in this one.
Tripp, are you live? Can you hear us?
I can hear you. I hope you can hear me.
I'm just making sure you're drowning here. You waited until the final show of the year for you to disappear. I'm going to go ahead and take Michigan and Ohio State, and then you can jump back in here, okay? Tabbed by ESPN.com is the greatest rivalry in all of sport in 1999, Phil. Game comes to Columbus, where Ohio State will try and snap a 3-game losing streak to Michigan, secure a rematch with Oregon, the Big Ten title game. Buckeyes are laying 21-43 is the total. 12 o'clock on Fox. Michigan teed off on Northwestern. They're 6-5, 4-4 in the league. Ohio State silenced Indiana with a dominant 38-15 win. Love how this week's pulls on all the heartstrings. Phil, even of Jim Harbaugh. While back in the NFL, he had the Chargers sporting some pretty sweet maize and blue unis against his brother on Monday night.
Yeah, and this one, to me, is tough to call both side and total, because when you look at the game, you think under. I mean, this is Ohio State's got the best defense in the country, holding opponents below their season average. They shut down Indiana last week. Michigan's got a really good defense. They are holding opponents to 71 yards per game below their season average. Tough against the run, tough against the pass. Great defensive line going against a banged-up Ohio State offensive line. Michigan's offense has been underwhelming all year. Finally got going last week against Northwestern, but they're not playing Northwestern's defense. And the last time they went on the road, they only had 206 yards against Indiana. So the game screams under. And then you look at the recent scores. 30-24, 45-29, 42-27. It just goes on and on, over. So it's, and I got to be honest with you, most of those games I like the under coming into the game. So it's one of those that you throw the books out the window. And as far as the side goes, I think Michigan's playing a lot better football right now. Their defense should be able to limit Ohio State and keep it closer than that 21-point spread. But look at Ohio State. They've lost 3 straight years to Michigan. And Ryan Day talks about finishing, and leaving no doubt. So you think if it's a fourth quarter and Michigan's kept it close, they're down by 15, and Ohio State's got a chance to score, they'll put the score in the end zone. And they showed that last week against Indiana with a late touchdown in that game. So I find it tough to go against Michigan or Ohio State, and I find it tough to pick the under when the over's been so dominant in the series.
All right. When Vanderbilt is a 7-point or more underdog, they cover. Plain and simple. They always cover. 7-0 against the spread in that situation.
With Diego Pavia at quarterback.
With Diego Pavia at quarterback. I'm going to get to that in just a second. They find themselves this week an 11-point home dog to Tennessee. Now, for the Vols, Heupel's been good as a big favorite at home, but not so much on the road. When they're favored by 7 or more on the road, he's just 1-2 straight up. Now, I know Tennessee's still motivated. They still have playoff aspirations, but this is a tricky spot for them, especially going against Diego Pavia, who, as you just mentioned, he's pretty good as a underdog quarterback, Phil.
Yeah, I think as a double-digit dog, just remarkable. It's going back to his days at New Mexico State. So that's very dangerous. And last week, I thought Vanderbilt was going to give a really good game to LSU. They jumped out to that lead on the first drive. I thought LSU pretty much controlled the game, but they did get the touchdown at the end for the magical cover. Tennessee, I've sort of been nonplussed with. Yeah, they beat UTEP last week. Big deal. But other than that, they've struggled offensively in a lot of their games, especially in the first half of the game. And if you leave Vanderbilt in the game, it's going to be dangerous. Now, in Tennessee's favor, they're going to have the crowd edge. When you look at the field, it's going to be mostly orange in the stands. They will have the crowd edge for this game like they always do. But I got to go with the scrappy underdog and Diego Pavia and company getting double digits at home. They've proven they can play with the big boys. They've upset Kentucky. They upset Alabama. Gave Texas a really good game. Upset Auburn. So I'm going to go with Vandy plus the points in this one.
I had that one on my board, so y'all are going against the wisdom that is swirling around in my mind. But I may come back to it as part of our power plays. We'll see. Palmetto State Series renewed for the 121st time, I think is what I have. Gamecocks won their last visit to Tiger Town 31-30 while snapping a 7-game Clemson win streak back in 2022. Playoffs still very much in both of these teams' grasp. Phil, as you indicated on the top of the show, you're excited to talk about this one. Each will need a little bit of help, sure. Miami losing at the JMI Wireless Dome would allow Clemson to get into the ACC title game, but still I think there's a scenario where we get 3 ACC teams potentially, and South Carolina could get themselves into the playoff as well. So a lot at stake here for Clemson and South Carolina. I've got the Tigers laying a short number 2.5, 49 the total, 12 o'clock Saturday, ESPN.
Yeah, and I think it does have playoff implications. I believe the winner has a really good chance of getting in because South Carolina, if you follow the SEC, they're probably the best, one of the best 3-loss teams there, if not the best, and they're in great current form right now. So if they were going to go into Clemson and win in Death Valley, I think you'd see this team vault even up higher on the committee's rankings, which matter now. They didn't matter 4 weeks ago, but they matter now. And then with Clemson, they're a team that, you lost to Georgia and then that upset loss to Louisville. But a win over a rising SEC team, I think, could vault them into the playoffs potentially as well. Now, I think Clemson's a better team. They're at home, should win the game. My negative factor in this one is the fact that Clemson's offensive line's banged up. And South Carolina actually is one of the best defensive lines in college football. Remember that Kentucky game? Remember a lot of other games South Carolina's played this year. So that matchup concerns me. I think Clemson should, if it wasn't for a banged up offensive line, I'd favor Clemson by about 6 in this game. I'm probably going to stay away from it based on those two factors because I'm not sure how healthy Clemson's offensive line will be for this one.
Louisville is a 3.5-point favorite this week on the road at Kentucky, but UK has had the Cards number here lately. 5-0 straight up and against the spread in this series in the last 5 meetings, but the Cats were favored in all of those. If you go back a little further into this series, you look at Mark Stoops, he's actually 0-3 straight up and ATS as a home dog to Louisville. Does any side of this one do anything for you here, Phil?
Yeah, I actually lean with Louisville in this one. And I'll say this, I had Louisville last year as well. And Louisville was pretty much dominating the game. You're going to win. And then, boom, a bunch of plays happen and Louisville loses. So they're playing with legitimate revenge. And let's face it, Brom's a Louisville graduate. This game's important to them. They need to get past Kentucky after losing all these games straight to them. And then you look at who these teams have beaten. Now, Kentucky beat Southern Miss, big deal. They did beat Ole Miss. That was their one big win of the year. And the Ohio U game that they won this year, Ohio U basically benched their quarterback right prior to the start of the game because they wanted to keep him healthy for MAC play, which turned out to be a pretty good thing. They rested their center, their quarterback, their running back. They had a whole bunch of guys on the bench. Kentucky won impressively, and Kentucky beat Murray State, one of the worst FCS teams. So other than Mississippi, they've really struggled to have a win that you like. Meanwhile, Louisville's beaten 5 teams that are bowl eligible. And you look at some of their losses this year, Notre Dame, SMU, Miami of Florida. Those are 3 teams that all have a chance to, or would currently be in the playoff mix. So much better resume going for Louisville this year. Legitimate revenge going for Louisville this year. Much better offense going for Louisville. I like the Cardinal minus the 3.5 here.
Yeah, I like the Cardinals now myself. Kansas is visiting Baylor. This game is teed up for a 12 o'clock start, ESPN2. Basically a pick 'em. Bears favored by a point. 61.5 is the total. Jayhawks have earned ranked wins over Iowa State, BYU, Colorado the last 3 weeks, while seeing Devin Neal become the school's all-time leading rusher and TD getter, also the first to rush for 1K in 3 straight years. In Lawrence, he's also got the second most career rushing yards among all P4 backs. He has been something to watch. Legacy game for him last week against Colorado. Baylor, meanwhile, is the league's longest win streak at 5 games. I repeat, Baylor has won more games in a row than anybody else in the Big 12. And as well as Kansas has played the final month, they must win this to become bowl eligible. So a lot at stake for the Jayhawks. While they might not be in contention for the playoff or the Big 12 title, still bowl eligibility means something for Lance Leipold and the Jayhawks, Phil.
Yeah, and Kansas is a lot better than its record. I've mentioned this week to week to week. Anytime we brought up Kansas, you go back to their first 5 games, they led in the fourth quarter of all 5 losses, and they were all pretty much single-digit losses, and against some pretty good teams. They could have had a much better record. They have been tough to go against. I mean, they dominated Iowa State. They almost beat Kansas State on the road, dominated BYU, and then beat Colorado as well last week. So tough to go against the Kansas, but. Tell you what, Baylor, as you mentioned, has won 5 in a row, and they've done it with a dynamic offense. This offense putting up 475 yards per game the last 4 weeks, 36 points per game. I love the way Sawyer Robertson's operating at quarterback. They've got Bryson Washington and Dawson Pendergrass at running back, pretty dangerous combo. And they're at home. They've beaten Kansas 13 straight years, and all of them by double digits. Most of them not even close. So I think final home game for Baylor. Last week I said Colorado is on the spread streak, but it's tough to go against them, tough to go against Kansas. It's basically a pick 'em game, though. I'm going to lean with Baylor, but you go against Kansas at your own risk.
We'll keep it in the Big 12. A couple of teams right in the middle of the pack in the Big 12 standings. West Virginia and Texas Tech, they've got a noon kick in Lubbock. Red Raiders, a 3.5-point favorite here. Texas Tech ranked 126th in yards per game given up so far this year on defense. West Virginia, not much better. They're 99th in that same department. Total's up there at 64.5. I would definitely take a look at the over here. What's your angle on this game, Phil?
Yeah, that's probably the best thing to go with in this one because West Virginia now has Garrett Green back at quarterback. They're healthier on the offense. Their defense still susceptible to the pass, which doesn't bode well against Texas Tech. I do think West Virginia's rush defense pretty good. Should be able to slow down Taj Brooks, but remember, Brooks can also be a weapon out of the backfield. And Texas Tech, as you mentioned, nothing but red when I look at the numbers there. They're allowing a high percentage of completions and a lot of yards on the ground. If you give up yards on the ground to West Virginia, you're in trouble with Garrett Green, with Jalen Wright, Jaheim White, and CJ Donaldson. They're dangerous. So I think over is probably your best bet there.
Okay, a Sun Belt Championship title game update here. Final weekend of the season. Louisiana at UL Monroe, 12 o'clock ESPNU. Raging Cajuns laying 8 on the road. 48.5 is a total. Tiebreaker scenarios are impossible to keep up with this league, much like the Big 12, Phil. So for simple math, much like a Marshall win over James Madison, Louisiana can lock up one half of the league title game with a win at UL Monroe. Do you like them to cover the 8, though, against their in-state rival?
I do. For a couple of reasons. First of all, you look at how the visitor has done this series. It's remarkable. I've been following it for basically a quarter of a century. They're 21-4, and pretty much it's been a no-brainer each year. You just pick the visitor and you cover. But there's more to it than that. Louisiana is, in my mind, the best team in the Sun Belt. They've been pretty much dominant the whole year. You go back to the Tulane game. Tulane, they lost by 8, but they gave up 2 defensive or special teams touchdowns in the game, 2 14-point swings, and only lost the game by 8 against a really good Tulane team. They outgained them 421-355. It was one of Tulane's worst outings of the year. Their other loss was to South Alabama. Sometimes you're going to have that game where you actually lose a game. South Alabama is pretty good. But other than that, they've been dominant. They blew out Troy last week, blew out Arkansas State the week before then. Everybody thought that they might struggle without Ben Woolridge at quarterback because he got injured, but Chandler Fields filled in well last week. They put up 51 points. Then you look at ULM. Now, I thought Brian Vincent did a tremendous job the first 6 games of the year. These guys were 5-1. They upset James Madison. They upset UAB. They were playing really, really good football. Then the Cinderella story turned into a pumpkin. And what we've seen the last 5 weeks is 5 losses. And I believe 5 non-covers. They're really struggling. And they're playing to their talent level because coming into the year, I thought they were one of the weaker teams in the Sun Belt, which is why I feel the 5-1 start was a Cinderella story. So put the 2 together. Great visitor, much better team on the road. I'm taking Louisiana minus the points here.
We got the Iron Bowl set for 3:30 on Saturday. Bama coming off that loss at Oklahoma. You talk about an eye-opener when you saw the score in that one. I get that if the Sooners had an easier schedule, they'd have a much better record. We've talked about that for a couple of weeks now. But Bama only scored 3 points last week. You just don't see that happen very often. They're back at home for this one, favored by 11.5 over Auburn. Phil, you told us last week to look out for Auburn, and they end up winning a wild one there over Texas A&M. You think they have any magic left for this weekend at Bryant-Denny?
I felt pretty good when they were up 21-0, huh? And then it turned out to go into 2 overtimes. What a game that was. I do think Auburn's a dangerous team. As I pointed out last week, they're among the SEC's best in yards per game. They're plus 79 yards per game. And generally, if you're that in the SEC, you're 6-2 at the end of the year. But this is an Auburn team that's underwater, below 500. I think the difference in this game, though, is going to be Jalen Milroe. Jalen Milroe was awful last week against that outstanding Oklahoma defense, a very underrated Oklahoma defense because everybody looks at the record. They don't look at the overall talent of the team. I think he'll have a better record here at home. This is one which has been dominated by the home team. Alabama's really struggled at Auburn, but at home, they dominate the games. So I'm going to look for Alabama to rebound. Auburn off a 2 overtime. Alabama off a loss gives us some value. I think that line would have been closer to 17 or 20 had that last week's games not happened. So I'll take the line value and take Alabama minus the points here.
Reminder, philsteele.com for more information, unlimited space in advance or in addition to the magazine. Of course, you have all that additional space online, philsteele.com, Phil Steele Plus. You have all the additional content, premium content for you to explore. And, of course, As always, just follow Phil on Twitter, on X, at Phil Steele 042. I'm at Kyle Schass at Locks of the Dock. Another 3:30 game. Notre Dame, 95th meeting, beg your pardon, with USC. They play for the Jewel Shillelagh. Fighting Irish favored by 7.5. 51 is the total. CBS game. And as disappointing as the season has been for Lincoln Riley and the Trojans, they could play spoiler here, Phil, and end the Irish's playoff chances. I'm worried. And I'm repping Caleb Williams. Shout out to Chi-Town Clothing. I've got a T-shirt on that has the painted fingernails grasping a football in Chicago Bears colors. Wearing my Bears hat, you cut me open, a bear claw will fall out, and so will Shamrocks. And Caleb Williams is going to be at this game because his jersey is getting retired. Cole Kmet, our tight end for the Bears, is going to be there to support Caleb. No bet between the former Irishman and the Trojan here. He wants this moment to be all about Caleb, and that could be some added incentive here for Lincoln Riley and the Trojans to correct a lot of wrongs. Again, they are 7.5-point dogs, 3:30, Phil. What's your feel for this one?
This one, folks could be talking about much like the Alabama-Oklahoma game last week. Now, I've been riding Notre Dame. I've been riding them all season long. I love it. They're blowing out opponents. They're doing great. I think despite all the key injuries that they've suffered, they have an outstanding run game. Riley Leonard's throwing the football better. But USC is not a 6-5 team, okay? USC lost to Michigan in a game where Michigan converted a long run at the end of the game, and 4th and goal at the 1, they score a touchdown. Change one play, stop them 4th and goal at the 1, they win that game. Minnesota, they're up by 7, fumble late. You might have to change 2 plays in that game. Penn State, they led the entire game, mostly by double digits. Lost in 2 overtimes. Change one play, they win that game. Maryland, here's the play to change. Up 7, USC kicking a field goal to clinch it. It's blocked, return down the field. USC gets a touchdown, beats them. Change that play. They beat Maryland in that game. And then Washington twice. They're inside the 10-yard line at the end of the game, down 5. Just one of those plays turns into a touchdown. They win that game. This is a 9-1 or a 10-1 or 11-0 team, USC. They are dangerous, very dangerous. They're at home. The home team has dominated the series. So don't give me that crap that USC is a 6-5 team. Much like Oklahoma was not a 5-win team last week, they are much better than the record would indicate. So this is a very dangerous spot for Notre Dame. As much as I've been riding the Irish, I lean with USC plus the points. Now, in the magazine, I picked Notre Dame to make the playoffs, so I'm hoping to win the game straight up. But be aware, be very afraid here, Notre Dame. It's a tough situation.
Well, on to a 10-1 team that probably could be 6-5. Let's talk about Miami. If you've watched Miami this season, you know the strategy. Yeah, go ahead, Phil.
I had a best bet on Wake Forest last week here on this show. We went 2-1, and that was my loss. And do I need to go in depth, or do you guys know what the hell happened in that game?
No, I know what happened. And it's kind of happened. It's been the theme all season. So if you know what to do with the Hurricanes now, fade them on the first half line, and then at halftime go in and live bet the crap out of them because they're going to somehow win. They trail by double digits late against Duke, somehow still covered a 21-point spread. Back and forth last week with Wake Forest before they pulled away late. This week at Syracuse, they're laying 11.5 on the road. They need to watch out too because Cuse is 2-0 this season as a home dog. They've got upsets over Virginia Tech and Georgia Tech up there at the Dome. Cuse plus 6.5 first half. Let's roll. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that's probably a good play. And Syracuse is going to come out with their hair on fire in this one. It's going to be a loud Carrier Dome crowd. Now, there were years where the Carrier Dome wasn't magical, but it's starting to turn into that. So you got Kyle McCord. They can throw the football. On the season, he's thrown for almost 4,000 yards with the 26-12 ratio. They've got Allen at running back. They've got weapons. And I think one of the big differences in Syracuse this year is Ronnie Gatson being back. He is a key piece of that offense. Missed all of last year with injury. So they're going to be electric. It's going to be the Dome. They're going to be fired up. I like Syracuse in this one, plus the points. But the negative part would be what we've seen, Miami trying to win Cam Ward the Heisman. We'll tuck on that late touchdown or two and get the cover. So even if you're up, you got Syracuse and you're up by 2 in the fourth quarter, don't be comfortable yet. Wait till the end of the game to get comfortable with that one. But I do lean with Syracuse plus the points. And I like your first half logic there, Tripp.
Yeah, inexplicably, I may have called it the JMI Wireless Dome. I want to call it the Carrier Dome, but it's the JMA Wireless Dome. So let's show some respect on that as Syracuse takes in Miami. Scary spot for the Canes coming up on Saturday. That's at 3:30, as is Arizona State and Arizona Sun Devils come in laying 8.5 at their in-state rival. 53.5 is the total. It's the 98th Territorial Cup. Cats have won the last 2 against their rival to the north. Sun Devils picked to finish last in the Big 12 and among 9, I repeat, 9 teams mathematically alive to reach the Big 12 title game and among the best positioned with Iowa State to reach. ASU, BYU, Iowa State, and Colorado all tied at 6-2, Phil. I read one article that said, and this was from Fox, 256 different possible combinations of results that will affect who makes this title game in the Big 12. Your magazine for this game, Phil, says the over is on a 9-2-1 run, averaging 74 points per game in total. It's only at 53.5, so I'm leaning over here, if anything.
Yeah, I would definitely lean with the over. Arizona does not have a great defense, and Arizona is just getting better and better offensively by the week. But my favorite play here would probably be Arizona State, for this reason. If you look at Arizona, they had decent expectations coming in the year. They finished in the top 10 last year. They, of course, had the coaching change, lost a lot of players. But in Big 12 play, they've really been struggling. They're minus 68 yards per game, pretty much getting outplayed on a weekly basis, with the exception of Houston 2 weeks ago, which they only outgained by 11 yards. Other than that, they're losing most of their games. Arizona State's impressed the hell out of me. You go back to that UCF game, they didn't even have Cam Scadaboo available and pulled out the win there. They went into Kansas State and kicked Kansas State's butt. And last week, they pretty much kicked BYU's butt. It was 21-3, and they let BYU back in the game late, and you had that play going on at the end of the game. But I think offensively, defensively, they're far superior. With Arizona, shut down Fafita, shut down McMillan. Fafita, the quarterback, McMillan, the wide receiver. If you do that, you shut down Arizona. I think Arizona State's a better team. And then, rarely do I say a team that lost as an underdog last year is playing with revenge. But last year, Arizona State got beat 59-23, a game they trailed 38-7 at the half against their rival. They had it handed to them. I don't think they show any mercy here. I like Arizona State minus the points.
All right, last Saturday, noon teaser, 7-point teaser. Jacksonville State hit, over on Ohio State, Indiana hit. All I need for the third leg of this teaser is Rutgers plus 4.5. You talk about an all-time bad beat with the way that game went down. To give up a late score to Illinois, go all the way back down, score, retake the lead. You can give up a field goal. It's fine. You can lose the game. I'm still going to win. They call timeout, and, Illinois realizes we can't kick that field goal, so we've got to throw the ball. And then to add on to everything, if you watch that play where Illinois scored at the end, Rutgers had 4 guys, they had 4 guys back there that could tackle him, and everybody took a bad angle.
And the play trip was get the ball to the 25 and kick a field goal. Yeah. The wide receiver did not obey orders and took it to the end zone as opposed to going down immediately as he caught the ball at the 25 so they could get the field goal.
Well, I want a refund. After destroying my noon teaser last week, Rutgers now heads to East Lansing to take on Michigan State. Sparty, a slight favorite here, 1 point right now. I think I've seen it as a pick'em in some spots, but Rutgers, they should have won the game last week against Illinois, and Illinois is pretty good. We've talked about them a little bit too here the last couple of weeks. They're a ranked team, and they just had a couple of games that got away from them. But Scarlet Knights, they've been a lot better since that USC game. What do you like here in this one, Phil?
Yeah, and the reason they've been a lot better since USC is their defense got healthier. You go back to that stretch they had against Wisconsin, UCLA, and USC, where their defense was giving up practically 40 points per game. They were missing a ton of players on the defensive side of the ball. With 3 guys from the secondary returned against Minnesota, they got their top defensive lineman back, and now they're starting to play football more like you would expect out of Schiano on the defense. And offensively, they look good. Ethan Kaliakmanis is a quarterback that nobody really had high hopes for coming in the season. He's getting better and better by the weeks. Nice 16-6 ratio. He's in the second year of the offensive coordinator who came over from Minnesota. He's back reunited with them. They've got Monangai at running back, so they're playing well. Now, Michigan State, if it's a team that showed up against Iowa then I think Rutgers is in trouble. They just dominated Iowa in that game. But other than that, they played pretty much like I thought Michigan State would be against a tough schedule. They've struggled. They were fortunate to get past Maryland earlier in the year. Aiden Childs is mistake prone, which might help out that Rutgers defense. So I'm going to go with Rutgers to pull the upset here on the road, slight upset as it is, but should be a really good game.
Before we jump to the evening slate on Saturday night, North Carolina favored at home by 3.5, 55.5 is the total, hosting NC State. We got both hometown radio calls from Learfield. You can listen to that on the Varsity Network app. When you're out of town and want to keep up with live college sports, be sure to download the free Varsity Network app, available for both Apple and Android. Listen to College Sports Live with the Varsity Network app. Phil, the headline here, though, it'll be Mack Brown's final game, coaching the Tar Heels in his second stint in Chapel Hills. He refused to step down and was instead fired on Tuesday, but does get one more game. Any sort of edge? You referenced the bounce game when a coaching decision is made. In this case, Mack is staying for one last hurrah. It's a 114th meeting. State has won 3 straight in the rivalry, including a double OT win the last time these two played at Keenan in 22.
Yeah, and I think, once again, we're looking at a revenge factor for North Carolina, the fact that North Carolina State has owned them the last couple of years. And last week, after that Wake Forest game, I listened to the Mack Brown interviews, and it was, we're bowl eligible. We're bowl eligible. The seniors are bowl eligible. We've been bowl eligible for this. We've been bowl. I think they took a step back and just sort of like I'm expecting from Nebraska this week against Iowa. They got their bowl eligibility, which was a concern when they opened up the season 3-4, and they sort of relaxed a little bit last week. I think Mack Brown's final game, this guy has meant so much to North Carolina, and he's such a player's coach. The players have to love Mack Brown. I think we're going to see their A-game effort. Now, my computer, without factoring in the emotion, had North Carolina an 8-point better team in this, and they're only laying 3.5. You look at NC State, their wins at Cal, a game they trailed by 2 scores in the fourth quarter, fortunate to win that game. Cal missed a field goal at the end of the game. Stanford, they beat at home. Stanford was struggling and making a long trip. Other than that, they haven't been impressive. I thought they could beat Georgia Tech. They didn't. I thought they could beat Duke. They didn't. Syracuse, Wake Forest. You go on and on. It's been a disappointing year for NC State. So I like North Carolina to send Mack Brown out a winner with a huge emotional effort.
All right, let's head to the night slate. First meeting for Texas and Texas A&M since 2011. You better believe Kyle Field, that's going to be a sight to see Saturday night in College Station. But the Aggies are a dog at home. Longhorns laying 6 in this one. Quinn Ewers, questionable for Texas. Correct me if I'm wrong here, guys. I think the winner of this game does make it into the SEC championship to face Georgia. For the Aggies to have any chance of making the playoff at all, they have to have this one. My lean would be with the home team here. I just really can't wait to see the atmosphere, because that place is going to be lubed up at 7:30. Well, it's on the ABC, so maybe it's a 7:55 kick, something like that. What do you like in this one, Phil?
That's one of my pet peeves, by the way. But anyway, going back to this one, I'm gonna let you guys pick it. It sounds like Tripp likes A&M, so because here's the reason why. I've been not impressed with Texas the last 4 weeks. Now, granted, they blew out Florida, but they were taking on a third-string walk-on quarterback and a banged-up Florida defense. Struggled in the first quarter and then turned it into a blowout. Other than that, they've got past Arkansas, got past Vandy, got past Kentucky. Late touchdown made it 31-14. But with A&M, go back to the LSU game. In the first half, they were outplayed. They sort of sprung Marcel Reed on LSU in the second half and got them the win. Then they were dominated by South Carolina on the road, beat New Mexico State, big deal. Mexico State, by the way, really struggles on the road. And then go into Auburn last week, and they're down 21-0 and end up losing. So I've been not impressed with either team coming in. I do, very thankful. It's Thanksgiving, so you got to be thankful that this rivalry is back. It was one of my favorite rivalries when it was around. It was very sad to see it go. So I'm going to be excited to watch the game, but I'm going to let you guys pick the game. It sounds like Tripp likes A&M.
Yeah, it's like these two have been estranged since 2011, and now they're having to live on the same block, in the same house again. But this is one prior to the season I had underlined, circled, highlighted, as my oceanography professor would tell me freshman year in Western Illinois University. Underline, circle, highlight. I've had this one more than any other game underlined, circled, and highlighted for this reason. First meeting, seems like the rivalry, the vitriol has grown even more when they haven't played each other, because now Texas comes into the SEC when Texas A&M tried to get away from them for greener pastures. It's going to be lubed up, as Tripp said. And I have been picking the Aggies since before the season started. I'm not moving off of this now. They're one of my 3 power plays. I like Texas A&M covering the 6 and winning outright. And I think the circumstances of losing a couple of games here over the last 3-4 weeks in the SEC is actually going to help them reset in this moment with their biggest in-state rival who they hate more than anything coming to their house, which was part of the deal, I think, Tripp, too, with Texas coming in. Hey, if they're going to come to the SEC, we get them at our home that very first year. We get the first home game.
Yeah, I'm glad that rivalry is back as well. Let's jump to another rivalry that's maybe lost a little bit of shine this year. Even Florida State, look, my guys probably look like the best team in all of college football last week to me. I mean,
they didn't cover.
That's why they did cover by half a point.
By half a point.
Just absolute domination over Charleston Southern.
Did you bet your house on that one?
No, I did not. I did not. It was actually pretty tight for a half or so there. I'm hoping my Noles can make a game of it Saturday night in Doak Campbell with the Gators in town. Florida favored by 14.5. Off that upset of Ole Miss, they're going to be a very confident squad heading into Tallahassee. The series going back to 2000, the Gators are 7-2 against the spread as the favorite in this game. I don't think there's real revenge here. Last year, the Noles were kind of supposed to win that game, but all the momentum this season is with those ugly orange helmets this week, Phil. If it was a 20-point spread, I would probably still jump on Florida here. What do you like?
Yeah, I like the Gators. I thought last year Florida outplayed Florida State and just came up short in that game, and it was a tough non-cover for them. A couple of late scores by Florida State. First downs were close. Yards, I mean, they held Florida State to 224 yards last year. So a tough loss for Florida. Now they're playing good. You go back and take a look at this team. They went into Mississippi State and dominated. They hosted UCF, dominated. They beat Tennessee. In my mind, they just didn't win on the scoreboard. They should have been up by a lot more at the half and only led 3-0, despite, I think, 4 trips into the red zone. They dominated Kentucky. And then I thought they would have beat Georgia had DJ Lagway not got hurt. Then you go to a third-string walk-on quarterback that didn't even play at Yale. And this guy struggled against Georgia, struggled against Texas. They get Lagway back. And even though Lagway can't run, they beat LSU. And then they beat Ole Miss last week. Lagway was able to run a little. They used him when needed in that game. I think they're a team on a roll. They're playing really good football right now. Florida State, as you've touched on all year, struggling. And, yeah, it's a chance to get a win. But this is a bunch of transfers coming in that are playing here. So I don't know how much you're into the rivalry part of it. I'm going to go with Florida minus the points in this one.
Boomer Sooner, OU is catching 6.5 on the road. First visit ever to Tiger Stadium. 47 the total with LSU, 7 o'clock on ESPN. Check the tape last week. I told you Brent Venables and the Sooners would need something and would get something to hang their hat on in their inaugural season in the SEC. And by golly, did they do it. We've already talked about it, 24-3. Just insane, that final over Alabama. Hard to see that one coming, sure. But I had a pretty strong feeling that Venables was going to show up. Can they do so now against LSU, who allowed that cover to Vanderbilt last week? Echoes of Fire Kelly throughout Tiger Stadium and Death Valley. It's just so comical. Certainly those fans in general. It's part of me. It's part of my lifestyle. I haven't spent a couple of years down there. None of it surprises me. But 6.5 is the total. Then LSU is favored by, Phil. Do you have a lean here with the Sooners coming in to close out the regular season at LSU?
Yeah, I like Oklahoma plus the points. As mentioned, I didn't think they were as bad as their record. They just played a hellacious schedule. I mean, losing to Texas, not a bad thing. At Ole Miss, not a bad loss. South Carolina, one of the best teams in the SEC. The Missouri game is a game they could easily have won, and they played a good second half. But the big difference for Oklahoma, they've had the defense all year. They're holding opponents to 104 yards per game, below their season average, which is number 4 in the country. But the big difference has been Jackson Arnold. Jackson Arnold, since he returned, has been a much better quarterback. He's got a 12-3 ratio, and last week ran for like 131 yards. What's LSU had trouble with this year? Oh, stopping a mobile quarterback. Well, guess what? They got one here in Jackson Arnold. So I think the improved Oklahoma offense to go along with an excellent Oklahoma defense. I like the Sooners plus the points in a potential upset.
Yeah, 4th all-time meeting between those two. Tigers won a BCS title over the Sooners in the past with their butts in the 2019 CFP semi, 63-28. But Joe Burrow, Thaddeus Moss, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, they're not walking through that door. So it'll be a good one at Tiger Stadium for sure. Purdue and Indiana. I expected more out of the Hoosiers last week. First quarter couldn't have gone any better for IU, but Ohio State just kind of toyed with them after that, winning 38-15. Some special teams plays went the way of the Buckeyes, broke the spirits of IU. I expect that frustration and disappointment of last week's showing, Phil, to come through in a dominant return home in a victory over a 1-10 Purdue team. 56.5 is the total. IU is laying 29, 7 o'clock on FSU 1. I think Indiana can easily cover this. Hell, they might hit the total themselves.
Yeah, I think when you look at Indiana, generally when the spread's 29, I don't have a lot of interest in the game. This one I do. I mean, when you take a look at Indiana, I think last week's game really changed on the drop punt snap, which gave Ohio State a touchdown with a minute to go and a half, and then give up a punt return touchdown. And now all of a sudden, a game where you played Ohio State even, it was 7-7. You're down by 14 against one of the best defenses in the country. Really changed the entire landscape of that game. Now you have Indiana off a loss at home, and they know they need to win impressively. And when Cignetti took the job, he called out Purdue first thing. He called out Michigan too, and they beat them this year. He did call out Ohio State, which Ohio State brought up numerous times last week. But I like the fact that in the fourth quarter, if you watch this guy, they were beating teams by 30 points per game prior to Ohio State, that he's not happy even when your team's up by 35 points. He wants to play the full 60 minutes, and Purdue gives you the perfect team. Now, Purdue's benefited from teams letting up on them. Oregon let up on them. There was 35-0. They could have beat them a lot worse. Illinois started looking ahead to Michigan up big. Even last week, Michigan State led them 24-3, pretty much controlled the first half, and then let up in the second half. Indiana's not going to let up. I like the Hoosiers. I'd lay 34-35 in this game. I like Indiana minus the points.
Top-ranked Oregon off a bye and at home Saturday night in Autzen Stadium, taking on the Washington Huskies. Ducks a big favorite here. 19.5 is the spread right now. Landing 0-3 against the Dogs. Oregon lost by a field goal in each of those contests. 2 of those were last season. So maybe some revenge factor going on here for Oregon. Washington's also off a bye. They're off a nice win over UCLA too, who's come on strong lately, but they haven't been the same team on the road this year. 0-4. It's just a really big spread that worries me there. Any value on either side of this here, Phil?
Yeah, I think there is value here, Tripp. And, to make the case for Oregon, they really don't have a weakness. They can run the ball, throw it, stop the run, stop good on defense, good on special teams. They really are the complete team. They're at home in Autzen Stadium. They're playing with revenge, legitimate revenge. Last year, they lost twice to Washington, both upsets, and both times had a path to the playoff ended for them. But here's the thing with Washington. And also throw in the fact that Washington, as you mentioned, poor on the road, 0-4 ATS, 0-4 straight up on the road. But Oregon's got some team on deck, Ohio State. And believe it or not, they're going to be an underdog. Yeah, number 1 Oregon will be an underdog to Ohio State next week in the Big Ten championship game. So that is a massive game that they have on deck. And then here's the other factor. Last year, the Ducks just slapped people around. They won by 35 points per game at home. You could always count on them to put on late scores. This year, they've been a different team. Maybe they're playing with a little bit of pressure, a little unbeaten pressure, but they're only beating teams at home by 15 points per game. They only beat Maryland by 21. Illinois, I thought they had in a great spot. They didn't beat them by a lot. Michigan State, they led 31-0. They gave up 10 late points. So they haven't been killing teams at the end. I think that look-ahead factor in the fourth quarter, the fact that Washington's better than their record, they're holding opponents to 63 yards below their season average. They're gaining 43 yards above the season average. They really are a decent team. I like Washington plus the points here.
Huskies and Ducks will be featured on the Blitz, as will K-State and Iowa State. Check out the College Football Blitz for free by going to the Varsity Network app. College football audio version of the NFL Red Zone channel every Saturday from noon to midnight Eastern Time. Just search College Football Blitz on the Varsity Network app. Also, you can find it on Sirius XM 207 and 969. Phil's been a part of that program a few times throughout the season. It'll be the final edition, noon to midnight Eastern, coming up this Saturday. It's Farmageddon, 108th meeting, Phil, between the Wildcats and the Clones. Iowa State, 2.5-point favorite at home in Ames, 51 total, 7:30 on Fox. 4-0 ATS is Iowa State against KTS against K-State in the last 4. They've won 3 of 4 overall. And as I outlined, too many scenarios in the Big 12 to consider, but the Clones are sitting the most pretty next to Arizona State.
Yeah, and when I look at this matchup, I think Iowa State may be the best team in the Big 12. And I believe it is the best team that Campbell's had there at Iowa State, Matt Campbell, the head coach. And the loss to Texas Tech surprised me. The late touchdown, the loss to Kansas surprised me. But they've gotten back in form. And even last week, they only beat Utah by 3, but they had a 405 to 224-yard edge, 25 to 9 first down. It's just a really good Iowa State team, a complete team that can run the ball, throw the ball, and they're strong on defense. Kansas State, I don't know if this team's as good as recent additions. You go back to the Kansas game, which they only won by 2 at home. You go back to Houston, they lost on the road. Arizona State, I thought, dominated them. They got their feet back on track, beating Cincinnati at home, but now have to go on the road. You look at how they've done on the road, barely got past Colorado. At BYU, they lost. At Tulane, I thought Tulane was a better team that game. So I think Iowa State's a better team at home. Once again, surprised they're only laying 2.5. Take advantage of that 2.5 in this game because it could be valuable. I think they should probably be favored by over a field goal. They're favored by under a field goal. I like Iowa State in this one.
All right, we'll go quick here so we can hit the late night chasers. We've got Marshall on the road at JMU. The Duke's a 3.5-point favorite, 8:00 kick Saturday night. Marshall needs a win here on Saturday to make that Sun Belt title game. 3.5-point dog. Any value on either side of this, Phil?
I would lean with Marshall. I think they're the better team. Their weakness this year has been allowing teams back in the game when they led big. And their 2 big losses that they had were at Virginia Tech, at Ohio State. James Madison's tough to go against at home, though. But I would lean with Marshall plus the points.
3 late games, Houston visiting BYU, Cougars of BYU, a little Cougar on Cougar crime. Everyone loves Cougars, right? BYU favored by 13 points at home, 41 total, 10:15 ESPN. There's New Mexico laying 2.5 on the road at Hawaii, 11 o'clock for that game. Tripp's going to frame up Air Force, though, favored by 11.5 on the road, 43.5 the total. As Phil, I think you have your eye on that one. They're visiting San Diego State, 10:30 on FS1, right, Tripp?
Yeah, they are. Air Force a 3.5-point favorite on the road, and I think Phil kind of told us throughout the season, like, be patient with Air Force. They're not going to quit, and that's been the case. They struggled early on, but they've won 3 in a row here. And San Diego State, it just seems like there's 2 teams going in opposite directions here. The Aztecs, they've lost 5 in a row. I'm on the Falcons minus the points here, Phil.
I'm with you 100%, Trip. Air Force has been winning me some money these last few weeks. And I love watching their games because early in the year, they didn't have an offense. Facing a non-option defense like Army or Navy, throw those games out because they know how to defend the option. But they were only averaging like 200 yards per game. You're like, where's the offense? But this was one of the youngest teams in the country. They've gotten better and better by the week. And now you look at them, over the last 4 weeks, you throw out that Army game. Once again, they know how to defend the option. They're close to 400 yards per game. So they've got the offense going. They're playing much better defense after allowing a lot of yards rushing and passing, playing much better. And over the last 4 weeks, they're plus 55 yards per game. And you hit it right on the head, Trip. You look at San Diego State over the last 4 weeks, this team is minus 185 yards per game and being outscored by 20 points per game. They just got bounced by Utah State, bounced by UNLV. Yes, they're at home, but what kind of crowd are they going to have there at San Diego State for a team that comes in 3-11 and follows in the Air Force? And plus, the other thing I look at late in the year when you're playing an option team, to stop the option, if you have one guy make a mistake, all of a sudden you got a player running free for a touchdown. When you've got a team that's 3-8 and just playing out the string at the end of the year, you think they might have a player or two that makes a mistake during the course of the game. So I like Air Force minus the points in this one.
Phil, before we turn the lights off on the 2024 edition of the Phil Steele Show, the Week 14 episode, our 15th episode of the year, and we get your power plays, I want to say again, thank you. It's been an incredible, what is this, year 3 that we've done this? Thank you so much. It's been an absolute joy. You are the godfather. You are the titan of the college football and preview magazine world. I know I'm expecting the 31st edition to be better than ever next year for 30 years and counting, being the most accurate magazine next year. PhilSteele.com is where everyone can go, at PhilSteele042. Of course, is where you can follow him on Twitter, on X. Phil, I know this is turning into a busy time for you. It's magazine prep season, but make sure you enjoy the holiday, okay? Don't be shy with the dressing and the stuffing and all of that.
Yeah, definitely not. I will say this about the magazine. The Sunday after Thanksgiving, which is this Sunday, is officially day one of magazine season. I start because some team seasons are complete. I could start going through the entire. I read through a stack this thick. Every article is written about the team for the entire year. Get to a real good flow of each and every team. Then I write the positions. What kind of shape were they heading into last year? What happened? What kind of shape are they heading in this year? And yes, there will be rewrites, and especially after I talk to the coaches in April. But it really gets my feet wet, gets my initial set of power ratings, and it's a long 6-month plus process to put that magazine out, and it starts this Sunday.
All right. Well, how do you want to punctuate week 14? What are your power plays here in the final weekend of the regular season?
2 of the games we've talked about. I'm going to go with Louisville minus the points over Kentucky. I'm going to go with Iowa State minus that 2.5 over Kansas State. And then I'm going to go with Wisconsin. Last week I liked Nebraska minus the 2.5 at home, needing to get to a bowl game. This week you got Wisconsin minus 2.5 at home. And I thought they played a good first half against Nebraska. Missed a couple of field goals in that game. I like Wisconsin minus the 2 or 2.5 against Minnesota at home to get to bowl eligibility for, I think, the 26th straight year.
Tripp, I've got an 8-shooter that I'm ready to fire from the hip, so I'll let you go first, and then I'm just going to rattle mine off. Might as well empty the clip, right? But what I feel strongly about, the most strongly, would be Louisville's pick 3.5 at Kentucky. Give me the Cardinals. Love that. I already told you about Texas A&M covering the 6, winning outright at home in College Station, and then IU covering the 29. I think the 35, 36 points that Phil said, if IU was favored by, he'd still take them. So Indiana, Texas A&M, and Louisville. I have others, but Tripp, I don't. We got to go. We got things to do. So, what are your favorite plays, Tripp?
I think because of my audio difficulties earlier, I missed the setup. But I like Georgia Tech plus the points against Georgia, 19.5. I like Air Force, which we just talked about, and unfortunately I'm going to have to go with the Florida Gators laying a big number in Tallahassee.
Okay. I also like Liberty, Tennessee, the visitor 21-4 in the Louisiana UL Monroe matchup. I love that little nugget. Louisiana favored by 8 on the road. I would take them. Carolina with the bounce game with Mac Brown and his final hurrah against NC State, and even Air Force there at the end, winning by the 3.5 at San Diego State. All great plays. Okay, we've got 60-plus minutes to give you to punctuate the 2024 season, and this show, the Phil Steele Show, that'll do it for 24. Phil, thank you again so much. Thank you to all the listeners, all the viewers. The YouTube channel numbers have been off the charts. Looking forward to bringing this thing back next year, hopefully. All right. You enjoy the off season, and magazine season is getting underway this weekend.
Yeah, and I'd like to thank everyone who watched and listened to it this year. And I'd like to thank you two for the great research you did on these games. I actually learned stuff as the show went on each week, and I'm sure our listeners did as well for the research you did on these games.
Tripp, you got the final word, my man.
Well, yeah, thanks to everybody. I mean, watching the show grow. I don't know if people understand just how hard it is to start something like this and build it from the ground up. But thank you to everybody that's been watching. And yeah, let's hope we've got some winners coming this week.
Yeah. Happy Thanksgiving to all, and bear down.